Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3. If the Walt Disney Company and Marvel Studios were counting on this film to pull the Marvel Cinematic Universe out of the doldrums, I'm not sure they're going to be happy with some of the results coming in on early estimates. And all the while, Bob Iger, like Nero, fiddles while Rome burns, still fumbling around with the state of Florida, which, as we told you early on, the legislature is going to win no matter what Disney does. Maybe they should focus on some of their cinematic franchises before they get involved in politics any further. Let's get into it. Renegade Online. Well, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. It's good to see everybody out there. And we got a lot to get into here. Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3. Now, this is something of a film that Marvel and a lot of Marvel fans out there were counting on to revitalize a flailing Marvel Cinematic Universe, which picked up anew after Endgame with Phase 4, once theaters began to reopen again in the post-COVID environment. And since then, the box office receipts for these films have continued to overall dwindle on average. Of course, with notable exceptions like Spider-Man: No Way Home, which was a picture that was distributed by Sony. Even Disney believed that Wakanda Forever could buck the current trend of the declining Marvel box office, which it did to an extent, but it still failed to get close enough to that vaunted $1 billion box office threshold that Disney loves to use to promote its marketing and the power of the Marvel brand. See, that plays into a big factor with what they can get with other partners like merchandise licensors. Even if they don't make that much money on those films, even at $1 billion, thanks to the enormous and exploding costs that they have to produce and then subsequently market these films. And then you have to wonder about something else, something we've covered here on Valiant Renegade for quite some time, and that is Disney's inexplicable desire to engage themselves into Florida state politics over, frankly, a rather mundane issue. And by that, I mean the legislation itself had absolutely no bearing on the Disney business operation or anything closely related to it. Certainly, there was a small group of very vocal employees that wanted the Walt Disney Company to leverage themselves into Florida politics. But of course, in the end of the day, that came with a cost, and that cost was the 1967 compact with the Florida state legislature that became known as the Reedy Creek Improvement DIstrict. Now it doesn't even have its own name anymore. And Disney, even though trying a few of their own shenanigans, as we correctly predicted would fall by the wayside very quickly, well, Ron DeSantis has struck back. And not to go into too many details on that, but just as we told you it would be the case, that the Florida state legislature and Ron DeSantis are having none of it, and Disney is not going to win that fight at the end of the day. All they managed to do with some of their little shenanigans was delay the inevitable, and that inevitable is now here. And we heard Ron DeSantis today talk about things like new taxes, new this, new that. And yes, he even made a wisecrack about putting a Florida state prison next to the Magic Kingdom. And if you actually believe that Ron DeSantis would do this, I'm sorry. I do think, however, it was one of the funniest political trolls I have ever seen. Well, it's to get to this. Because you see, while the Walt Disney Company is fumbling the state of Florida in a fight they can't possibly win, they probably should be paying more attention to what's going on inside their own house. See, Disney is so engaged in politics in every facet of their being at this point, in the parks, in their children's entertainment, and even in their headline pieces of production like Marvel titles. They're missing the boat, and it's soured a lot of audiences. Now, while they can't do anything about Florida, they can work on what's going on inside Marvel, Lucasfilm, Pixar, the Walt Disney Animation Studios, so on and so forth. But to this point, unfortunately, they don't seem like they have any desire to fix the problems. And while that's not to say that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 will be quote-unquote woke, but it should call to your attention the deleterious effects that all of the other previous entries in Marvel's Phases 4 and 5 have had up to this point, just as we projected they very well may, even with a movie like Guardians, that bad movie after bad movie after bad movie that doesn't really please the fan base, well, you're going to wind up with one of your most valuable and successful pieces of property inside that family taking the axe along with all the rest. This from late last week, Deadline magazine from Anthony D'Alessandro. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is tracking to open at $130 million in the US and Canada. Yikes. That would be atrocious. And we covered some of this on the live show on Sunday, yesterday, as I'm recording this, probably 2 days ago now, as you're seeing this Tuesday morning. And that's not something that's going to bode well for this movie going forward. Because as we've talked about many times on this program, Marvel's box office is something that you can set your watch by. In fact, Marvel movies tend to finish up on average about 2.25 to 2.5 times their opening weekend, with a few exceptions to be sure in there. Again, most notably the Spider-Man pictures that come from Sony. But when it comes to actual Disney-made and Disney-distributed Marvel titles, usually it doesn't go very well after the first 5 to 7 days. By that point, at least half of the box office is already baked in. And if the Guardians of the Galaxy is going to open at $130 million, well, we can use that math to project what the final run might be if this opening box office weekend is to hold. Let's take a look. I want you to take a look at those domestic opening weekends relative to their final tallies. Take a look at Thor Love and Thunder. That opened with $144 million. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, as of right now, according to Deadline's early estimates, is projected at this point to open about 10% below Thor Love and Thunder. That would be something spectacular. Thor Love and Thunder opening with 144 and concluding with about 343. If you scale that out, they wound up with between a 2.25 and a 2.5x set of legs from that opening weekend. Extrapolating that out into the Guardians of the Galaxy's $130 million, that would suggest, under that example, that Guardians of the Galaxy 3's domestic box office run would conclude somewhere in the vicinity of $325 million. The international box office is a little bit different now because China is on the board, at least so far as we know at this point. Something that Thor Love and Thunder did not enjoy. But as a reminder, the Chinese box office returns very little back to the distributor, in the range of 20 to 25%, compared to other international markets that average around 42%. U.S. markets may be closer to 55 to 56% if a movie performs high enough. Now, one of the big problems with MCU titles not legging out very well past their opening weekend, with those box offices being so heavily front-loaded, meaning that the vast majority of the fans who really want to go see these films are going to see it immediately. Thursday night previews, Friday opening day, Saturday, and that first Sunday. Once you get outside of those 3 days, the drop is precipitous, and the walk-up traffic just really isn't there to support it. Unless, of course, you have a film, perhaps Guardians of the Galaxy 3 will be that film, that could buck the trend and actually give audiences a movie they really love and then want to go back to see again and again. That's something that has not happened with other Marvel titles in Phases 4 and 5 to this point. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is ending its run less than $500 million globally. Marvel, I promise you, is not happy on that front, because that certainly has cost them a good bit of money, probably to the tune of $100+ million at this point. The production budget on Ant-Man, though stated at $200 million, does not include several weeks, if not a month plus, of massive reshoots and post-production VFX redos. That probably drove the cost closer to $250, which seems to be the going rate for most Marvel pictures now. We don't know what the budget is yet for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but given the history to this point, with Thor Love and Thunder, with Wakanda Forever, and Ant-Man, I'd be shocked to see Guardians 3 come in under $250 million. And that means another $150 million or so that Disney has cashed, ready to go for marketing. That means that this film, without China even in the mix, is going to have to get its butt up to somewhere around $800 million once again just to break even. And speaking of Thor Love and Thunder, let's take a walk down memory lane. This is a chart from June 9th of 2022 over at Box Office Pro. And this was some of the early projections for several movies on there you may recognize. Look at the top. Just about a week before it opened, Lightyear, also from the Walt Disney Company, was projected around $100 million. It came nowhere near that. Look at the domestic low-high range they had for that film. That was an absolute disaster for the Walt Disney Company. Then if we go down, we see Minions Rise of Gru, and those projections were actually beaten, both in opening weekend and the domestic high range of 287 was trounced as well. Thor Love and Thunder, however, around the same time out from where we are to Guardians of the Galaxy 3 at this point, about a month away. Actually, now with Guardians, it's about 3 weeks away. But Thor Love and Thunder, even at that point, was clicking in around 155 to 205 million with a 350 to 500 million domestic low-high estimate. Not only did it come in at the lower end of that projection range, it fell about $10 to $11 million beneath the lowest projection for opening weekend, while at the same time also falling below the minimum $350 million projection about a month before it opened from Box Office Pro. Now, that was a film that got a lot of bad audience reaction, to be sure. I don't know if Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is going to get that. Time will tell, but if Disney doesn't do something fast, the best shot they had for a billion-dollar picture in the MCU from a Disney-distributed piece is going to go out the window pretty quickly because there is nothing left on the board after this thing for quite some time for Disney to hang their hat on. As a reminder, The Marvels was moved as soon as Ant-Man released earlier this year. They moved it from July, a hot summer month for releases, all the way back into November. They switched it with Haunted Mansion. So now The Marvels is going to come out around the Thanksgiving holiday. Why? You guessed it. More reshoots, more VFX post-production, fixing things in the film that were a mess that test audiences couldn't stand. And if you think Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is going to open low with 130 to maybe 140 million, get ready to see how bad The Marvels is. Disney might be looking back on Ant-Man 3 at that point and calling it a success. Till next time, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and until next time, take care.